With a few spots left open here on this Toronto Blue Jays 2025 roster, how will some of the young stars fit in this season?
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
As always, I'm Braden Iwasko. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Braden5 Iwasko, Carter First too, as well on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Blue Jays. As well, if you're new here to YouTube or you're listening somewhere else, make sure you head over to the YouTube page. You hit the subscription button. It's free. You might as well do it. It keeps you up to date on all the Blue Jays news, information, whatever else comes out. And you get podcasts, shorts, videos, podcasts, this whole ordeal. So make sure you guys go and hit the subscribe button. We notice a lot of you guys that watch aren't subscribed. So you might as well be if you're coming back consistently. And you might as well. It's there. It's not going to hurt anybody. Helps us out. So you might as well. Discord link is down in the description. The Fantasy League is coming about. So make sure you guys stay tuned for early March, and we will have that ready to go. And it's first come, first serve for 18 spots. So make sure you guys get in there. We'll have some fun, rip some fantasy. I know Carter's an absolute fiend on the wire, so you're going to have to pay a lot of attention. As we get into today, some stuff to get into. It's not maybe the most pressing, but we got to talk about these young guys. Where do they fit into this lineup? Who's going to actually see playing time? Who's not? And as well, we have some spring training updates as well, just going through the rest of the week and a couple stuff to look forward to in spring training. Carter, let's kick it off. I know, we've talked about some of the open positions before on this baseball team, but for these young guys, what's still available for spots to take?
When we look at this offseason, the Toronto Blue Jays did obviously address a few positions of need. They got their power bat. When we were talking about second baseman, need a third baseman, need that corner outfield spot. Got your corner outfielder, you got your second baseman. Third baseman still a little bit open here. But instead of just going through, obviously, who's on the Toronto Blue Jays, if you guys are listening to this podcast, you know who's going to be starting at shortstop. You know who's going to be starting at first base. So these are the positions that still can kind of be fluid. They can fluctuate a little bit throughout the season, and there's still some uncertainty surrounding these positions. So the number one that I have here is the DH spot. Right now, it could be Anthony Santander. It could be a guy like Will Wagner. It could be a younger guy again like Elvis Martinez. There is some options here. Maybe it's just a position that completely fluctuates. Maybe they want George Springer to rest. You throw him at DH. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. probably going to get some DH reps here and there. So DH is my number one. Just with things going on, the Joey Loperfido injury doesn't seem to be serious, obviously, but still something to consider. Daulton Varsho with him being out as well. We got the center field spot. At least for the first couple weeks of the season, Daulton Varsho, obviously, when he comes back, going to overtake that center field spot once again. Then after that, those are like the two main positions that would be like opening day roster, like your first lineup going out. But then there's obviously some bench spots as well. One of them is going to be either Christian Bethencourt or Tyler Heineman. You're going to have a catcher in there. So then that leaves three other spots, probably a fourth outfielder, an infielder replacement, and then just an extra guy, maybe a speed guy, maybe a defensive replacement. Depends what the Toronto Blue Jays kind of want to do. So there is some option for a lot of younger guys, some kind of fringe MLB players to make this team. Again, there's that DH spot that has some favorites to it, but for the rest of it's fairly open. It's going to come down to the spring training battle. It's going to come down to how these younger players produce, how they progress throughout spring training. And then obviously there still is the option that some of these guys start in AAA and then maybe they have a Spencer Horwitz type start to the season, get pulled up and have an immediate impact on the Toronto Blue Jays. So Braden, you kind of want to go over some of the players that we might be able to see this step from. We might be able to see hopefully some production from in terms of younger guys on the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, so I guess let's start here. Will Wagner right now is the favorite to take that DH spot. The Blue Jays just seem to love him. That organization seems to love what he did last season. Again, interested to see what he brings this season, especially in spring training, how we can see his development. So he's the guy really to keep your eye on. Then you got guys obviously like Davis Schneider, Joey Loperfido, Addison Barger, and then some of your, less proven, as in like Elvis Martinez. I'm missing one, Carter. Allen Roden as well, who we've seen a little bit of. Need to see more from him still. So when you go down this list, and I guess this is where I'll sort of kick off the conversation. Will Wagner, really haven't seen a lot from him. We've seen a little bit more at slightly from Joey Loperfido, just even within spring training. We've seen him play quite a bit. Obviously, took that dive into center field into the back wall. So he should be back and fine. Everything seems fine there. Will progress as normal. Davis Schneider, we've seen a absolute ton from Davis Schneider. We've seen his highs, we've seen his lows. So there's question marks around him there. Aurelvis Martinez, a guy that I think has a lot of people hopeful. Obviously, hit that home run in spring training just a few days ago. What are we going to see from him? Still pretty up in the air. I think we see the potential with his bat again, but haven't seen a lot from him at the MLB level, obviously, with getting the 80 game suspension for the PED use. So we will have to wait and see. I talked about Alan Roden. Won't haven't seen enough from him to really make a hardcore decision. Carter, is there one guy right now? I guess besides Joey Loper, or besides Will Wagner, is there another guy that you're looking at to really take over that DH spot? Or right now, do you think in your head, without seeing a ton of spring training, is that the guy that you still probably think this organization is leaning towards?
I think if it stood as of right now and you needed one guy, one young guy to fill this DH spot, I guess it would be Will Wagner. But I think there is another guy that, as we see spring training progress and we just see the prototypical build that this guy has, it makes perfect sense to throw him at DH. And it's the guy I've been very high on for a long time. The power does not lie, and that is Aurelvis Martinez. This is a guy you can throw in at second base. You can throw him at short, at third base, kind of anywhere in the infield. Again, do that at your own risk, because then you have to deal with the defensive liability that this guy is. And that's why I think it makes a lot of sense that if you do throw Aurelvis Martinez predominantly at DH, it could be beneficial to this team. Even taking a step farther back, I think that makes the most sense. If you want to maximize your defensive output, maximize your offensive output, you probably just move Anthony Santander to that DH spot. But does he want to play DH full time? Is he one of those guys that plays better when he's also playing in the outfield? Kind of keeps him mentally dialed in to play defense and offense. Like if you ask Rafael Devers, that guy's not moving from third base. Are we going to have another situation like that? Probably not with Anthony Santander, but that always is an option. But back on the Aurelvis Martinez train, this guy just has natural power. The power, like I said, the power does not lie. This is going to translate to the MLB. He's hitting home runs in minor league parks. Again, the pitching is going to get better, but the park dimensions do not change. The power is going to be there for Aurelvis Martinez. Last year in AAA, had a slash line of 267 with a 346 OBP, 523 slugging percentage. That was in AAA, 17 home runs over 74 games. Year before, 28 home runs, 94 RBIs in 125 games in 2023, 30 home runs, 76 RBIs in 118 games in 2022. If you're looking at a prototypical DH guy, a prototypical DH position, you want power out of that DH spot. Will Wagner would give you a little bit of that, but this is going to be more of a Spencer Horwitz type. Can maybe get to that 15 home run clip. I think pushing 20 would be an absolutely unbelievable season from Will Wagner. I think Aurelvis Martinez, like if once he gets established in the major leagues, I think 20 home runs is going to be kind of the minimum clip for Aurelvis. I think he can be a 20 home run guy, 25 home run guy, maybe pushing 30. Is that an expectation his first year in the major leagues? Don't think you can say that. With Aurelvis Martinez, everything would be so much more clear, and this situation would be so much easier to make if this guy just doesn't take PEDs. If you get that second half of Aurelvis Martinez, if he gets that 80-game stretch at the end of 2024, you know what you would get from Aurelvis Martinez at the major league level. I think that is a huge reason that we have so many question marks regarding some of these young guys on the team. Will Wagner, obviously a great choice as well that we're going to get into, but has 24 games played at the major league level. Those 24 games are unbelievable, but can he do that in a bigger sample size? Aurelvis Martinez had one game at the major league level, went 1 for 333 average. I mean, that's Hall of Fame numbers right there. If you could do that on a way larger sample size. But again, this guy had 3 at-bats. You want to see more from Aurelvis Martinez, but that's going to be the common theme with pretty much every single player out of these 6 on this list, other than David Schneider. We do have a little bit of a sample size there. And before I throw it back to you, just wanted to kind of go over why we don't have like a Jonathan Clase in this, why we don't have Leo Jimenez, maybe like a Jake Bloss, who we're not really going to mention too much in this episode, because these guys we don't think are going to have a big impact, if any impact, on the 2025 Toronto Blue Jays. Jake Bloss, obviously very good prospect, but you have 5 guys in front of him. You have Yariel Rodriguez in the bullpen, Ryan Yarborough, you have Alek Manoah coming back later on in the season. Jonathan Clase, just the bat isn't there. Great defender, obviously very quick, will steal bases, but you're going to need a bat for this outfield. Jonathan Clase not really making the mark for me. And then Leo Jimenez, you just have too many, just an influx of middle infielders. Leo Jimenez, the floor is there. Again, a pretty good defender as well. But if you're looking to maximize the power output, just the offensive output of this lineup, you don't really do that with Leo Jimenez. But throwing it over to you, Braden, just like, I know I kind of spewed off a lot there, just overall reactions on what I just said.
Yeah, I guess I'll go back to the Aurelvis Martinez of it all because you're right. I think the PED usage really set his opportunity back because the organization could have taken a good solid look at him last year. It was the perfect scenario to see what you have out of all of these young guys. And with him going in through the PED thing and getting the 80 game suspension, really, really hurts him and his development. I think it has to. I think that's why this organization now is leaning towards Will Wagner because they've seen Will Wagner. They've seen him perform, again, not a ton, but enough at the major league level for them to have somewhat of an idea of what kind of player he is. Aurelvis Martinez doesn't have that. Yes, we can go and look at AAA and you can see, the makeup is there. You understand what kind of player he is, but unproven. And even more unproven than a guy like Will Wagner or Joey Loperfido. And I know I want to get into the Addison Barger and the Davis Schneider of it all in the next segment and sort of how those guys fit in, but there's very limited amount of spots. I mean, we've talked about some guys that we think could slot in as like the 4 bench spots, right? And that's not even taking into consideration guys like possibly Nathan Lucas or whoever else that might be in there, right? So there's already a spot who I'm already going with Bethencourt as my number 2. I think he's going to be the secondary catcher. So that takes away 1 spot there. Now you're left with 3 bench spots and the DH if you want to count it. So really there's 4 spots for what we're thinking, 6 guys. So a lot to think about here. I know we haven't overly gone over everybody in depth, but I think let's give some time to each player coming into this next segment, Carter. Talk about realistic shot. Like if you had to put a percentage on it, what's the odds of them making it to this team this coming season? We'll take a quick break and we'll come back with all of that. So, Carter, let's start with the guy we were talking about originally, sort of just lately here, and that's Aurelvis Martinez. We've sort of gone over the player that he is, the drawbacks of what happened to him last season. What are the actual odds that Aurelvis Martinez can, let's say, start with this team? He makes it on one of the 3, or 4 spots available. Do you think possibly one of them is Aurelvis Martinez?
I think it has to be. When we're talking about roster spots, like with these younger guys, I'm much more comfortable throwing in an Addison Barger or like a Davis Schneider type rather than like a Miles Straw or Nathan Lucas in AAA at this point. These guys are still young. They have progressions to make. Miles Straw, you know what you're going to get out of Miles Straw. Nathan Lucas, you've seen what he's done at the major league level. So in that sense, when it comes to roster spots, I think those 2 I much rather lean toward rather than a younger guy. It just makes more sense to give them more playing time in AAA. But with Aurelvis Martinez, I think with him and Will Wagner, those are going to be my 2. Like it's those 2, and then the rest of them aren't necessarily close. I think both of them should be a surefire shot to make this team in 2025. Like Aurelvis Martinez, I think why I want him as the DH is because I like Will Wagner in the field way more than I'm going to like a guy like Aurelvis Martinez. You can kind of throw Will Wagner in a lot of these spots. There's going to be days where Vladdy's going to have to rest. Like Vladdy's not going to play 162, but Bichette's not going to play 162. Andrus minutes to go down the list. These guys are not going to play every single game. So Will Wagner would be my first option off the bench as that guy. I want him in that spot, whether it's Andrus Gimenez, Bichette, we can kind of go over that list. And the reason I want Aurelvis in that DH spot, I think, again, that power role is going to be much more maximized. And I have some stats just on his defense over the last few seasons in the minor leagues. He's just horrific at defense. 938 fielding percentage at second last season, and 919 at third base, and 918 at shortstop. And that wasn't last season. That's over his minor league career. Guy had 22 errors at third base in 131 games. This is over a 194 game span. I just want you to guess at this one. 194 games. Guess how many errors Aurelvis Martinez had at shortstop?
At shortstop, 100. How many games? 194.
194. So just over a full like sample size of a season. Probably 1.25, I would say.
I'm gonna say because you said he had that many at third base. I'm gonna say 30.
He had 56 errors in 194 games. Is this a guy that you're going to want in your infield? It's horrendous. You do not want Aurelvis Martinez in your infield. But again, when he brings that power, when he has that upside with the bat, I think this would be a prime candidate to have as a DH. Because as good of a player as Will Wagner is, I'm not sure if you want this guy as your fundamental DH. I'd much rather have him in the field. his defense isn't necessarily what he's advertised as this defensive specialist, but in that short sample size he did have at second base, I think Will Wagner looked very good at second base. This is a guy, again, who's going to be more of that Spencer Horwitz prototypical hitter. He's going to be a guy that we might be able to look at as a leadoff hitter, a guy that hopefully can get on base. He hit 300 in that small sample size of last season. So kind of going back to the overall question that you asked me, how likely is it that Aurelvis Martinez, and I'm going to bunch Will Wagner in this equation as well, how likely are these two to make the team? I'm going to put them both at like 95%. I think they have to be on this major league lineup. I think they have to be on this major league roster. I'm not saying they necessarily have to start, but I think when you see the power that Aurelvis Martinez possesses, you see just the overall fundamental game that Will Wagner presents in front of you, and looking at some of the secondary options. Like if Nathan Lucas or Miles Straw is getting playing time over a guy like Aurelvis Martinez or Will Wagner, there should be riots. People should not be happy about those situations made by John Schneider. But the other kind of flip side of the coin is, if these guys are going to make the team, you're going to have to play them. You cannot play them once every 3 games, because that is not going to be good for their progression. You saw how good Will Wagner was with those everyday playing minutes. You see how good Aurelvis Martinez is in AAA. Again, can these guys do it in the bigger sample size at the major league level? That's the question. But both those guys, I'm going to kind of lump them together. They have to be on this major league team. They have to be on the opening day roster when it comes.
Yeah, I'm going to argue that a little bit with you, and I think Will Wagner is a shoe-in. I don't think there's any question mark. I would almost put him at a 99%. If he's not on the team, something horrific has happened, because this organization loves him and they want him making that team opening day. Aurelvis Martinez, I'm a little bit less sure, and it's not because of a skill issue. It is because, like you said, not great defensively. We've known that. He is going to be a primary DH, would be my assumption. And I don't necessarily know if that's the best for Aurelvis Martinez's progression, to just come in and be a DH every 3rd game. And so I could see them sending him and starting him in AAA, getting him a bunch of games before bringing him up. And if you see he's continuing to do well, then maybe you make him that primary DH. But I just have a weird feeling that he is not going to be on this starting roster, just for the fact that he's not going to get enough playing time. And I think you could look at giving guys like Davis Schneider and or Addison Barger, you're more comfortable giving them the once every 3 games playing time and being okay with that, because maybe their progression isn't as it's not as much of a necessity.
There you go.
As Aurelvis Martinez struggling there for a bit. It's because Aurelvis Martinez is one of your biggest prospects. You want his progression to go well. You want him to succeed. Whereas I don't necessarily believe that it's looked at the same way for Davis Schneider and Addison Barger. I think you want them to succeed, but I think they're okay bench bats to slide in at DH once every 3rd game. So I honestly think if I were to go down this list, I think you have Will Wagner, who is like their guy. They want him in there. You got Davis Schneider. You got Addison Barger. That takes up 3 of the, if you want to call it 5, I guess, Bethencourt with the other one. Then you have 1 more spot available. And I think I'd have a tough time believing that it's not Joey Loperfido. But maybe they do go the Miles Straw direction and whatever, or Nathan Lucas, one of the two. And then I think Alan Roden is a for sure AAA starter here. I don't think he gets the call at the beginning of the season to start with the major league club. That is just my guess. I think Aurelvis, you want him to be in the major leagues, but I think you also don't want to hinder his progression. I guess that's sort of where I'm at.
Yeah, I guess there is different ways to look at this. Like, what is best for 2025? I think if you're putting Davis Schneider and Addison Barger over Aurelvis Martinez in 2025 just for this year, I think you're absolutely insane. I think the upside is just completely in different realms. We're going to talk about Davis Schneider, Addison Barger, and Aurelvis Martinez, but I do understand, like, you can look at it from what's best for the organization long term. Is it the best for Aurelvis Martinez to just DH for all of 2025? We've seen Bichette be a horrific defender. We've seen him get a lot better with just practice playing at shortstop. Is that something you want to kind of experiment with in 2025 when you have all these other underlying issues, kind of bring back in all the uncertainty that we do have with Bichette, with the Vladdies? We want this team to be very good in 2025. This front office wants to keep Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Bichette. They have to put out the best roster possible. So unfortunately, I think they might have to put aside what is best for Aurelvis Martinez. I think you do have to start this guy compared to if like Davis Schneider, who I'm not high on whatsoever. I'll say that right now. I think when it comes down to Elvis Martinez, Will Wagner, if it had to come down to push to shove, I think it has to be Will Wagner. But when we're talking about upside, when I'm talking about how I think this full season is going to transpire, I think that Elvis Martinez could have a major impact, and the upside just skyrockets with Elvis Martinez. We were talking about how the need for this power bat, you might have that within this organization. Again, I might be getting ahead of myself because it is Elvis Martinez, and he's played one game at the major league level. But I think you have to consider Elvis Martinez for one of those roles. Like Davis Schneider coming off the bench, that does not excite me. Or Addison Barger coming off the bench from what I saw in 2024, that's not very exciting for me either. I'd much rather have, again, if we're talking about upside, I think it's Addison Barger. But Davis Schneider, you've seen more from him. If you want a guy that you kind of know what you're going to get from him, you have a little bit of a safer floor. I think that is Davis Schneider. And I have a little bit of a different take than you on Alan Rodin and Joey Loperfido as well. I think Alan Rodin's going to have a better season than Joey Loperfido. That's where I'm at with Alan Rodin.
I could see that. But I think when you look at who's going to get the opening day spot, and maybe spring training changes minds, but I think Joey Loperfido is looked at as the more so now, where Alan Rodin looks like more the future. Again, that's just in my head. That's sort of the feeling I'm getting from this organization and what their plan is. And again, it sort of goes back to the same thing I was talking about with Elvis Martinez, right? Is like, you see the possibility with Alan Rodin, and you think that, okay, if we keep him in AAA, he gets playing time, he gets at bats, he gets playing time in the field, he gets all that progression. Again, I think you're okay with sacrificing a little bit from Joey Loperfido to know that you have Alan Rodin or Elvis Martinez, Arjun Amala, all those guys still coming up the pipeline. At least it gives you some hope for the future, where if you're throwing some of these guys into a situation where they're only going to play once every 3 days, I think you'd much rather sacrifice Joey Loperfido to the fire and just hope that him, Davis, or Addison Barger, who at this point, with all three of those guys, I'm not necessarily super high on. I even from what I've seen in Davis in spring training, looks like he's figured out a little bit the strike zone a little bit better than how he finished last season. But he's still taking uppercut swings. He's hitting a lot of fly balls, which is what you want sort of from him. You want him to be that power bat, but it still looks iffy to me. I want him to succeed, but I think you'd much rather, I don't want to say sacrifice, but sacrifice one of those three guys' progression more so than some of these young up-and-coming prospects that you have. And I think if push comes to shove and this team really needs a power bat, then maybe you look, okay, maybe we got to make Elvis Martinez that everyday player. We bring him up from AAA and say, here you go. But I think in a certain sense, I think you're right. I think that decision has to be made early rather than too late. I think it's, if these three guys aren't doing anything, then you got to say, okay, Elvis Martinez, come up. We're giving you 15 games. Show us what you can do in 15 games and take that spot for yourself. And maybe that's the play that this organization is going to look at. And again, a lot of this will be decided in spring training, but I feel like minds are already a little bit made up. I think if push comes to shove, right, their hand is being forced in a certain direction. That's just my thoughts.
This is where I'm at. You keep mentioning this notion of the future. We want to build for the future. What is the future if the Toronto Blue Jays aren't good in 2025? They're really like, I don't see a future. I don't know what that future is necessarily. And again, it depends on how they're going to use these players. Like if they don't have a plan to play them 2 out of 3 games, they don't have a plan to make them a focal point of this team. Obviously, like your Vladdies or Bo Bichettes or Anthony Santander. So those are going to be the guys you're relying on. I'm not trying to make it sound like Will Wagner might be the make it or break it of the season. But when you kind of break it down and you really think about it, if you get a massive step from whether it's Elvis Martinez, whether it's Will Wagner, be Alan Rodin, it could be Joey Loperfido. I don't really care who that step is from. If you do get a massive step from one of these guys and you get a very productive rookie season, even if it's like a slash line of 270, like a 750 OPS, if you can get something like that from one of these younger players, that could be the difference from the Toronto Blue Jays winning an extra 3 games and making the playoffs, or losing those 3 games and not making the playoffs. So I think what we've seen from Ross Atkins this offseason, he says we're kind of abandoning the safety nets, we're kind of going all in. I think you have to take that same approach when it comes to the prospects as well. It might speed up their development a little bit. It might be a long-term hindrance. It might not give them the exact confidence that they do want. But I think you kind of have to do this trial and error approach. I think you're going to have to make those decisions early on, like you said. And if you're going to be in on a guy like Alan Rodin, you got to play him early. If you're going to be in on a guy like Elvis Martinez, you got to make those decisions early. Mediocrity is just not going to be enough for the Toronto Blue Jays. Maybe again, if you're looking at the progressions that you want these guys to make. You're looking at the prospect pool, but I don't think any of that matters in the big picture if you're not successful in 2025 and you lose those superstars at the end of the season because you're not a good baseball team.
Yeah, it's a loaded question, and again, I sort of look at this from different angles because there's something that I want to see happen, right? And I want to see a Elvis in there because I think he is probably the most likely guy to hit. We always ask for that extra 20 home run hitter, and I think he's really the guy that gives you that possibility, right, of driving and runs, prototypical DH. And if I'm looking at what do I want to see this year, of course, I'm going Elvis, I'm going Will Wagner. Those two guys for sure I want to see. I just look at this from an organizational standpoint, and I just find it very hard to believe that they are going to send down Joey Loperfido or Addison Barger or Davis Schneider or two of the three of them. I find that very hard to believe. As much as it's probably the right move, I don't necessarily know what you're going to get from Addison Barger anymore. I'm sort of long past what Addison Barger is. I've let that go. The Davis Schneider still holds a little bit of my heart, but even that I'm seeing that, like, hey, unless this guy has an explosion of talent, I don't know where we're going from here. But I just think I don't think this organization is going to say, hey, we're going to send two of those three guys down to the minors. I'm very shocked if that happens.
And I don't see a scenario where Joey Loperfido's on the team, Alan Roden, or Elvis Martinez, Will Wagner, Addison Barger. Like, you're not going to have that many young players on the team because at that point, you're forcing some of these guys to be off the bench bats. You're forcing some of these guys to not play these full innings, these full games that you want from these younger players. It's probably going to, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Miles Straw gets a bench spot on this team, especially with the Daulton Varsho DH. His guy, again, you're not worried about Miles Straw progression. He's going to play good defense. He's not going to hit good. But again, that kind of is what it is. Joey Loperfido makes sense, has that MLB experience. Again, when you look at the floor, I think that makes a lot of sense. But where I'm at is you got to take a shot on some of these guys. You're going to have to let some of these guys try to win them and play themselves into a regular role, whether that is Elvis Martinez, whether that's Will Wagner. Well, it doesn't matter who it is. You're going to have to give these guys a longer leash, and you're going to have to let them make those rookie mistakes, make those early season mistakes, and hopefully it all pays off for the better, and they have very productive seasons for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Yeah, and I think it comes back down to this. I agree with you. I think you need one of these guys to take a huge step, and I think we talked about that a little bit in an episode prior of, like, hey, who's going to be the guy? Who's going to step up and prove that, I want to take this opportunity? And that's going to be a huge question mark moving into the season because, I don't think Will Wagner is the best option at DH. I think he doesn't bring you that power. And maybe if you're going to slot Will Wagner in at the number one spot eventually, then okay. Then I'm okay with that because he's an on-base guy. He's a slap single, double hitter. I like that. But I think when you look at this team, what's the one big need is somebody that's going to drive runs in. And so, again, it all comes back to how does this lineup look? Is George Springer going to be hitting one for some reason again? Or are they going to give that role to Will Wagner? And if that's the case, where's George Springer hit? Are they trying to bring in more power with Elvis Martinez? There's a lot of question marks, and I'm really going to be excited about when the opening day roster does come out and we finally see what this complete team looks like. I think, at least it'll be like questions answered sort of thing, right? We'll have a for sure. But in saying all of that, Carter, we got to get into some spring training news just over the next few days, couple of things to cover because, we're in spring training. We want to know which guys are going to play which days and which days should I turn the TV on to watch. So we'll get into all that when we come back. Do you have anything else before we kick out of this last segment here?
No, I just we'll end up ranking these young stars, which ones we think are going to have the most production on the Toronto Blue Jays, which ones we're the most confident in. And then obviously some spring training news. Where's Anthony Santander? Answering some of the questions that you guys are probably looking for. Obviously, we got to address the elephant in the room in the third segment as well. So we're going to get into all of that coming up. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether it's I'm snacking at my desk on a road trip or just need a protein boost, they're always my to-go snack. Whenever you're in a pinch, whether you're running late for something, whether you just, procrastinate like me and just leave too late, Wonderful Pistachios, perfect convenient snack, will tide you over until you're able to have a very satiating meal. And they also taste very good, which is obviously a very important component of having a snack. Another nice factor with Wonderful Pistachios is that they are a complete protein and they provide all 9 essential amino acids. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more.
So, Carter, before we get into the spring training news of everything, I guess out of the 6 guys we mentioned, best to worst, who do you got? Most production this year? Who gets the most playing? I guess let's go by who gets the most playing time, do you think, this season? Let's go that way.
I got to switch up my list. If it's who gets the most playing time, the one I'm the highest on, if you guys couldn't tell, it's Aurelvis Martinez. I think he makes the biggest impact, even over a guy like Will Wagner, who plays the most. It's got to be Will Wagner. Just the versatility. I think you can throw this guy in a lot more different positions. Obviously, brings the defense a lot more than Aurelvis Martinez. So if you want to, again, maximize that defensive output, I think it has to be Will Wagner. Nice to have Aurelvis at number 2. And then, honestly, I have a pretty big gap for the most part. I think you maybe throw, now that this list is guess who gets the most playing time, maybe Joey Loperfido can kind of be in this middle ground. Then I have Alan Roden, and then it would be Davis Schneider, who in the short term, I like him a little bit better than this last guy. And not Aurelvis Martinez. That's Addison Barger. I think with Davis Schneider, I think the floor is a little bit better than what you get from Addison Barger. The arm strength from Addison Barger is absolutely ridiculous, but the feeling just at third base, I don't love that whatsoever. David Schneider, if you need another corner outfield position, I'd much rather throw defensively David Schneider in the outfield compared to Addison Barger. So for me, it's Will Wagner, Elvis Martinez, Joey Loperfido, Alan Roden, David Schneider, Addison Barger.
Yeah, and I think if we're going by playing time, it's definitely Will Wagner for me. I'd love to say Elvis Martinez, and I think Aurelvis Martinez ends up getting the most. I don't think he starts with the team, like I said before. That's just my outlook. I just don't know that they're going to pull the trigger. They probably should. I just don't think they will. So I don't think he starts the season with the team, but I think eventually does make it back up to the big leagues, and he probably will get it. It might be a closer to an everyday sort of position for Aurelvis Martinez, depending on the situation. So I like him at 2. I don't have Roden at 3. As much as, again, I think he could be of use to this squad. I just think he's a guy that's going to play most of this year in AAA. And then Davis Schneider and Addison Barger. Like I said, I'm almost completely out on Addison Barger. Unless I see something drastic, I am pretty out on him. And that's not saying a lot because I don't have a ton of faith in Davis anymore, sadly enough. But he is a little bit more versatile. He can play second some games. He can play in the outfield. You got a little bit more versatility there. And I think just the way he works the count, gets on base a little bit more as well. So I think you take that of a guy that's going to come in and play once in a while. I don't know. I'm a little bit all over the place. I think Will Wagner's an absolute. Aurelvis eventually. I just don't think he starts. I think Joey Loperfido is probably my number 2, to be honest with you. Just off the rip, I think if you're talking about 2 guys that are for sure going to start on this team, I think it's Will Wagner and Joey Loperfido. And Joey Loperfido is more so the case that he's going to be taking over for Daulton Varsho in center, at least until he gets back. Yeah, and then for the outlook, yeah, I don't know, Carter. I'm a little bit all over the map here, but I think it is necessary for this team to be good that you do give Aurelvis Martinez a shot. I just think it'll happen a little bit later than the start of the year. And in saying that, I guess that we have some updates to get into on spring training. Just a couple things that I want to go over.
Yeah, first, can we address the elephant in the room? Unfortunately,
sure.
I mean, the Jays lost.
First
undefeated, no more. What are we gonna do? We lost the 4th game of spring training. Like, I almost bawled my eyes out today because it means so much for the upcoming season.
You know what? Somebody came up to me today and they go, "This team looks like they could win 162 games," and I'm like, "Yeah, so far." Not so much. No, that sucks. But I mean, again, take away what you will. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't care. Realistically,
it's spring training.
Whatever.
Just to get into everything, Anthony Santander has been away from camp, sorting out his visa. He'll be back in Dunedin tonight. That was yesterday. go through a full day at the complex on Thursday and expected to play Friday, says John Schneider. So good news there. And talking about Joey Loperfido and obviously him going headfirst into that wall, which looked actually horrible when you go back and watch that clip. No concussion symptoms from Joey Loperfido is slated for a full day of work today and a return to game action as soon as Friday, says John Schneider. As well, we have a little bit of the pitching matchups here, or not matchups, but who's going to start where. Easton Lucas will get Thursday against at the Orioles. Chris Bassitt Friday afternoon versus the Tigers. Jake Bloss versus the Yankees on Friday evening. Kevin Gausman slated to throw 30 to 35 pitches live BP before getting into a game, so he's still got to get into that. So some good news. We see a lot of guys. Easton Lucas, I'm actually a little bit shocked with how many starts he's getting. I wasn't necessarily sure what they're looking for in him, but obviously they want to see a little bit more. So good for him. We'll see how he does.
Yeah, you got a lefty. Like this rotation does not have starting pitching, so this is the perfect time to see what Easton Lucas has. Again, you're not going to be as worried about what Kevin Gausman doing early on in February, but a guy like Easton Lucas, maybe going to be a depth piece for the Toronto Blue Jays. Again, don't necessarily see him making the team, but could be a guy that you might have to rely on in AAA. God forbid, there is some injuries. You don't want that in the starting rotation, but it's baseball. Things happen, so if you might have to rely on a guy like Easton Lucas, perfect opportunity to see how much depth you do have in that starting rotation. But other than that, that's pretty much it for me. Just wanted to say thank you guys for watching. The likes, comments, everything recently has been appreciated. We have noticed that about 78% of you guys are not subscribed. So if you are coming back, tuning into all the podcasts, the shorts, whatever it is, it helps us out a ton. It also keeps our podcast shorts, whatever we do post, at the top of your page. Braden, you got anything else to add before we do kind of duck out for this Thursday episode?
No, this is a big storyline to watch. I guess I'll leave it here. This is a huge storyline to watch of which young player takes the next step, because it might mean life or death here for this Toronto Blue Jays team, of watching some of these guys either take the next step or play up to their potential, bounce back years. There's a lot of things going on with this team, and this will be for sure one we'll keep a close eye on.
Yeah, we're going to have to. Again, young players are going to be the future of the Toronto Blue Jays. It's going to be a lot easier, even with all the uncertainty going on with the major league roster right now, if some of these young guys do take a step, whether, again, Orells Martinez, we could keep going down the list, Will Wagner. One guy's going to have to do it. Someone's going to have to step up if this team is going to be competitive in 2025. We're just going to have to see who that is. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.